Welcome back to another video, and in this video we're going to be continuing on with our core data tutorial series, and in this particular tutorial we are going to be taking a look at how we can update items in core data. Now in this video, like I mentioned previously, we're going to continue on using NSFetchedResultsController to have our data drive our UI instead of the other way around. To make things more efficient, but you do not need to use NSFetchedResultsController like I mentioned previously. You can update the attribute values, the property values of your objects, and then reload the data or, and refetch it as needed to make things work as you need them to. Manually, you can do all that stuff manually and it will work just fine. Just keep in mind that it won't be as efficient and not as performant in some cases. Now, NSFetchedResultsController, however, is much more performant. And frankly, it is pretty simple to work with. Once you understand first the delegates and, the delegates communication pattern, right? The delegates and protocols pattern that we discussed in the iOS series and that you should be familiar with by now. But also, NSFetchedResultsController does a lot of stuff for you behind the scenes that you don't have to worry about. So, let's go ahead then and get started. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to have this class or some other separate object or an extension or however you want to do it implement or rather conform to the NSFetchedResultsControllerDelegate protocol. It's a long name, I know, but this will allow us to override some methods. All the methods in this delegate are optional methods. You don't have to implement any of them, but it is a good idea. And the method that we're going to use will allow us to detect when changes are made to our managed object context. So, for example, when we update the property value of an object, or when we delete an object, or when we insert objects, or when we move objects and stuff like that. Such as, say, updating the sort descriptor or something like that. Okay? So, that is going to be vital for this video and the next video. So what we're going to do first is we're going to set the delegate property of our fetched results controller to self, and Xcode will throw an error at us because we're not conforming to NSFetchedResultsControllerDelegate yet. But after that, we will add the delegate or the protocol conformance. So let's go ahead and go into Xcode. And here we will say frc.delegate equals self. Save that. And as you can see here, we are getting an error saying, hey, you can't do that, right? You're not conforming to this protocol, and that's fine. Let's go all the way back up here. And after where we are inheriting from UI table view controller, go ahead and say comma, and then we're going to conform to NSFetchedResultsControllerDelegate. Let's see here. There it is. NSFetchedResultsControllerDelegate. Go ahead and save that. Now we do have everything that we need to run the application. Okay, so here's our application. It is running. And we do get our to-do lists, and we get our to-do list items and all that sort of stuff. However, we now need to actually do something with this delegate. So what we're going to do is at the bottom of our class here, I gave myself a little bit of room here. And here we'll say controller did change let's see. Okay, let's see. I want to make sure this is the right one. Okay, this is what we want. So let's go over the function signature here so you understand what we're dealing with. So func controller. So controller, we're getting in the instance of our fetched results controller. So whatever fetched results controller called this method here. Did change an object of type any at an index path. And this index path is optional for some kind of operation type. So insert, delete, update, or move. And then there's also a new index path, and that is generally used for move operations. And that index path is also optional. So inside of this method, what we want to do is we want to switch between our different types of operations. So we'll say switch type, and then the ones that we're going to focus on in this video are insert and update. So case dot insert. If we detect an insert, we simply want to insert rows into our table. So let the table view know, hey, insert some rows at the given index path, array of index paths, because we've inserted some new data for you. So we will say then table view dot insert rows at an array of index paths, and we're going to give it index path like that. With, and I'll just say automatic. Now, you could try to safely unwrap that index path optional, and that would be generally ideal. That would be the most accepted way. But you can force unwrap it here. That does work. Just keep in mind, though, that as with any scenario where you are unwrapping, where you're force unwrapping an optional, it can fail if something isn't right. So if this ever is nil for whatever reason, then this code would crash. And so what you might want to do instead is say guard let index path equals index path, else return. So we would just return, we would do nothing if the index path here is, for whatever reason, nil. And then we can get rid of that exclamation point, and we wouldn't have to worry about any crashes. Then we need the update case. So case update. Now, what do we want to do when we have an update case? Well, when we have an update, what we want to do is specifically reload the data in any rows, right, that we're given. In this case, just the index path that we're given here, which is one index path. This will take an array of index paths because of how table view is structured here. If you have multiple rows you want to update, they want you to be able to do that in one call rather than having multiple calls to a single method. So inside of our update case, we'll say table view dot reload rows at an array of index paths where we pass it index path, like that. Then we need to also give it an animation, which again we'll say automatic. Okay, and then for everything else, we'll just have default. We want to simply just break out. That's it. We just want to break out of the switch if it's a delete or move operation for now. In the next video, we'll take a look at delete operations, which is actually just as easy, but that's besides the point. Okay, so that's our delegate method. Let's go over what we've just done so we have a further understanding. We have overridden a method from NSFetchedResultsControllerDelegate that detects changes in objects that we've fetched from core data. When it gets fired off, we're given the object that changed. We're given the index path for that object that changed. We're given the fetched results controller that called this method. We're given the type of operation that was detected, and then we are also given a new index path for the object, which is generally used for move operations. Okay, then we are unwrapping the index path. Not the new index path, but the other index path. We're given that. So we unwrap that to make sure that we actually have one to work with. If we don't, we simply just return and do nothing. If we do, we then go and switch over the type of operation that we detected. If we are doing an insert operation, we simply insert rows into our table view at the given index path for the object that we're given. If we detected that we've updated something in an object, we simply reload the specific rows at that array of index paths that we pass in. And then for everything else, we just break out and do nothing. Okay? So, with that being said, now we actually need to trigger this method by updating an object somehow. And so how do we do that? Well, the way that we can do that is by Well, first, what I've done here to facilitate this is I have two swipe actions, one on the leading and one on the trailing edge of each cell. The one on the leading edge will update the completion status of a to-do list item. The one on the trailing edge will eventually delete an item. But for right now, that does nothing. Okay. So let's go ahead and find that delegate method for our leading swipe actions. All right. So inside of this swipe action, what we're going to do is, well, first let's kind of go over what we have by default here. What I've done is I've first retrieved the item we want to work with by calling the object method of our fetched results controller. We looked at that in the last video, so you should know how to do that by now. Then we're creating a UI contextual action, making sure it has a weak reference to self and all of that sort of stuff. We're unwrapping self safely to make sure that we actually do have a reference to self instead of it being nil. This helps to avoid memory leaks and strong references. Now, I'm going to go ahead and modify the title here. We'll say item.completed mark as incomplete. Otherwise, mark it as complete. There we go. Then we also for the trailing closure here for its handler, we don't want the first two parameters, but we do want the third, which is its completion handler, to tell UIKit, hey, this was completed, or this action failed to execute, right? So after we've unwrapped self, what we want to do is we simply want to say item dot completed dot toggle. And what that will do is it will toggle the completed property of our to-do list item from true to false or false to true. It's a utility method built into the bool type, which is very useful. So you don't have to say, for example, item.completed equals exclamation point to do dot completed to set the value to the inverse. You can just call toggle and it will do it for you. It makes your code a lot easier to read. But then after that, we need to save those changes. Once those changes are saved, then our delegate method gets triggered. And the reason why it's able to do that is because the fetched results controller, because we gave it our managed object context, what it does internally is it listens for when those changes get saved to the context. And when it does, it triggers any relevant delegate methods. So we'll say do. Well, what we also want to do is, let's see here. what we want to do is we also want let context equals self data controller dot container dot view context. Okay. Here then we'll say do try context dot save. And if that was successful, we will say handler true. Catch handler false. Okay. And so, with that, that is the update code complete. Let context equals self. Okay. Now, Xcode claims that self isn't being used, but it is. Okay, so cannot find update. So what we want to do then, because it can't find update, case.update. Okay, there we go. All right, cool. So with that, we can save it and run our code. We have a successful build. Here's our table. So let's go to do item 1 for to-do list 2. And right now it's marked as incomplete. If we go to our action menu here, or we perform the swipe on the cell and say mark as complete, now to do item 1 for to-do list 2 is marked as complete. And then we can also say mark as incomplete. And now it's incomplete. So that is how we can perform updates to our core data entities, and then use NSFetchedResultsController to handle those, handle any table view updates that are necessary. Now, before I go, I do want to point out that if you're using diffable data sources like UI table view diffable data source, NS table view diffable data source, UI collection view diffable data source, or NS collection view diffable data source, any of the four, NSFetchedResultsControllerDelegate does have an equivalent method for diffable data sources that gives you a diffable data source snapshot, which is an instance of NS diffable data source snapshot. And that snapshot can be used to update your data source as needed whenever something changes, which is extraordinarily helpful. So it can play nicely with diffable data sources if that's what you're using. Now, I challenge you to create a table view or collection view with core data that uses diffable data sources. Use NSFetchedResultsController and the delegate to handle deleting or even deleting if you want to go that far, if you want to try to figure that out. Inserting and updating data in your core data stack, core data store. And then going and updating your diffable data source that way. I challenge you to do that. It's not too difficult, but it's something that you'll be doing every day, going out to the documentation, Googling, whatever the case might be, experimenting, trying to get things to work. All right, so that pretty much does it for this video, guys. Thank you all so very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.